Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Jumpstart Monday. We're broadcasting live from Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. This is the last episode in the series of getting to know yourself, but also getting to know others. We're talking about the personality types based on the Enneagram psychometric testing. We already had 2 successful episodes. This is the last and final one, the third one. And together with Sophia, today we're analyzing 3 personality types. We're going first and foremost to the intense creative, which is the feeling part, the heart. Then we're moving on to the quiet specialist, which is the thinking part. And last but not least, we're going into the adaptive peacemaker, which is the intuition, the gut. Please do share this episode. If you're watching this now, please do share this episode so we can touch more people. And last but not least, if you identify with any types, please drop it in the chat so we will see that you identify with that type and you also listening to what we're about to say. Having said all this, let me turn on the microphone over to Sophia. And Sophia, good morning and have a great week starting.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here again once again to talk about the Enneagram types. And without further ado, let's go to the first type we are going to discuss today, and it's the intense creative. The intense creative is, as the word says, a person that is very creative. They focus on expressing themselves. They are very attuned to their emotions and probably to the emotions of others. And when it comes to their vices, they are a person who envies the life of other people. They feel that there is always something missing from their life, and the grass is always greener, let's say, from the point of view of the intense creative. Just one example of a famous person that is an intense creative. Amy Winehouse is a good example. She is a person who managed with her songwriting to attune to emotions and to really create these pieces of art that are touching other people. And that's a big characteristic of intense creatives. That's why they usually have jobs that are creative, like songwriters, artists, poets, etc. So that's the general description. Michael, what is your experience with working with intense creatives?
First and foremost, well done, Sophia. I love your explanation. I would say that the grass is greener where you water it, not on the other side. And Amy Winehouse was an amazing example you just brought up because, as you said, these are the people who feel that there's something missing in their life or they are envious of something else. And Amy Winehouse, even though she was so talented, she lost her life. She took her own life at the end of the day, probably because she thought something was missing from her life. They revert to sometimes feeling disappointed. They can revert to drugs, but at the end of the day, she took her own life. So that was a brilliant example you brought up. What I do with intense creatives is in my coaching sessions, I use the Ben Franklin method in order to help them. The Ben Franklin method, coming from Ben Franklin, the former president of the United States, is a simple method. You just write all your virtues on one side of the paper and all the cons. Or if you have a situation that you need to analyze and reach a result, reach a decision, you just write things down. If these people, these talented people, these intense creatives, write down all their pros, all they feel gratitude for, all that they are talented and it's working towards their favor, they would see that this list will weigh on the side of the pros. So once they see all these virtues, immediately they start to understand that they're worthy. They start to understand that they are adding value into this world. So this is a technique that I've used in several occasions with people who have identified through the Enneagram that they're intense creative, in order to boost their morale and in order to help them to go not in the way of Amy Winehouse. I'm not talking in terms of talent, because they should go that way in terms of talent, but in the way of having a better life and feeling respectful and feeling gratitude for what God has given to them.
Yeah, I love this exercise. It's very relevant because these are people who are who have a lot to bring in this world, but they feel different, and this difference is helping them disconnect, let's say, and feel less important than the others. Thank you, Michael. So shall we move to the next one?
Please be my guest.
The next one is the quiet specialist. I know this type very well. My husband is a quiet specialist. And the quiet specialists are people who are, um, they want to research a lot, they want to learn a lot, and they believe that the world is invasive and they need to preserve their energy and their resources. That's why their vice is avarice. And for those of you who don't know the word, avarice is a connection to the materialistic. They seem very materialistic. They sometimes feel like they are hoarding things like resources. My example, my husband, for example, he has a big collection of records because he wants to keep all the music next to him. And a famous example of a quiet specialist is Bill Gates, whom we all know. And Bill Gates is known, if you have watched also the Netflix documentary, he's known uh, because he's taking 2 weeks every year and he's isolating himself in a cabin with a big stack of books, and he dedicates that time to read and to learn. So, Michael, what is your experience with quiet specialists?
As you correctly said, these are the people. I think the example you have brought is a spot on example. I would say that the quiet specialists, they like to think a lot and analyze things in their head.
Yeah.
So I would say that they should partner up with someone who's more decisive in taking action. Bill Gates had Paul Allen, if you recall, and that's a huge part of Microsoft's success. Steve Jobs had Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak probably was bordering on the side of a quiet specialist. So they had each other. So my take on this is that I always ask them, what are you thinking? What do you think is your next move? Get them to open up, but also I encourage them to partner up because these people are very gifted. They can see all the possibilities, but sometimes they get stuck, or most of the times they get stuck on thinking instead of action. And yes, theory precedes practice, but if you stay too long on theory, then you should become a philosopher rather than a practitioner. So that's my advice, Sophia.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
do,
that's
do you have
spot
any
on.
advice as well on
Yeah, no,
quiet
that's
specialists?
spot on. Unless your job is really to do research all the time or to be a philosopher, which is fine, then forget about this advice. But otherwise, the common reaction of quiet specialists when they are faced with a new project or a new challenge is to think and to research. So my suggestion is, if you are this kind of person, put a limit on the time that you spend on research, and force yourself in a positive way to take action afterwards.
So you're talking about a deadline.
A deadline,
Deadline.
exactly.
I like this line. Deadline.
Yeah.
Yes, deadline or survival line. Yes, if you put it. Okay,
Yeah.
what do we have next? The last one.
The last one, number 9, is a person who, according to what I've read, is the majority of the population, the adaptive peacemaker. They are the persons who want to bring harmony and peace in the groups that they are in, and they focus on making sure that other people do not have conflicts between them. And that's why their vices, they tend to forget themselves. They tend to neglect their own well-being and their own opinions, and they don't show their own opinions actually. An example of a famous person that I have for this type is the Queen Elizabeth of England. She is a person who is in a position that has a possibility of creating a lot of conflict and challenges. But throughout her reign, she managed to keep the harmony. She managed to not get involved in conflicts, in politics. whether it was, a matter of the prime minister or a matter of her children, she always remained neutral. So that's the peacemaker. I don't know, Michael, what's your experience with peacemakers?
First of all, I love the example, Sophia, that you brought. I think this is the first episode you brought these famous people in. You should go back to the next 2 episodes and give us some more famous people, because now I do remember everything. Once I remember the famous people, I can see the characteristics. Adaptive peacemakers. A lot of my mentees are adaptive peacemakers. In the Enneagram psychometric testing, you're not one type, you're predominantly one type.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go into it, but the wings, what you have on the left and on the right, influence you. In my case, I'm a street perfectionist, number 1. So I have a wing that's number 9. And I truly empathize and understand them because I want to avoid conflict at all costs. Some of my relatives, they love conflict. Some of the managers I know, successful leaders, even my brother, he loves it. If he's right, of course, not if he's wrong. But I cannot sleep in the evening if I know that I have to come and discuss with you, Sophia, and probably get into an argument or a discussion or something that is not might not lead to a favorable outcome or make you feel bad at that time. I would say my advice to everyone who's an adaptive peacemaker is the exact same advice I've given to a young gentleman, a manager who came recently here for a coaching session, is partner up with someone inside the office that has different characteristics than yours. Somebody who can go into a situation, in his case, they were negotiating contracts, and can talk on behalf of the company, can represent you, can be your right-hand person, doesn't matter if it's above or below, but somebody who can draw some lines in the sand. If they cannot do it, maybe your management can do it and say, this is the line we've drawn in the sand, and the customer cannot cross this line, we cannot cross this line. This is the final percentage we're giving out. So you preserve the adaptive peacemaker. You don't get their stresses high up, because if people start coming into conflict, if their customers start coming into conflict, their stresses will go high up. Then their life gets into a mix and they feel bad. So I would urge them to partner up, as we said earlier, with somebody else. That somebody else can be somebody inside the office.
And this is a great advice, and I think many of us, independent of your type, we can partner with someone that is complementing us. Maybe another thing for the peacemakers is practice putting yourself first with little things. You don't have to do it at work, but like, for example, if you want to start gym and your partner is complaining that you will be away from the house for 1 hour, just go ahead and do it. Practice doing things that are just for you.
I think you speak from experience, Sophia. That's my feeling from this example. I have a feeling this is spoken from experience. It came from the gut, from the feeling and the thinking.
I cannot deny or confirm, but yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so shall we do a recap of the 9 types that we have seen in the previous episode and this episode?
Yes, of course. Be my guest.
Okay, let me show you the wheel. First of all, as you have seen in all these episodes, we talked about different personalities that we are not 100% one of them, but we identify with some of their characteristics. This is a great comment. Yeah.
Sometimes there are people who work with you which combine these types of personalities. How do you cope with these when there is conflict of personalities?
That's a tough one. I think that people, I don't know, Michael, but I think people can exhibit characteristics of 2 different personalities depending on the setting, but it doesn't mean that their inner motivation is both of them. Their inner motivation is one of them, usually.
I agree with you, but I think the second part of Christine's question is the reason we have gone ahead and we've done all this series. How do you cope with this when there is conflict of personalities? There will always be conflict of personalities. And the reason we want to educate people on the type of personalities and how you handle not only yourself, but also the other people. And inside the Enneagram psychometric testing, Sophia, there are 2 pages devoted to each and every personality, how you give feedback, how you handle them, how you avoid conflict or how you deal in conflict. And that's a great question, Christine. I would say that first and foremost, you shouldn't suppose which personality you are. You should take the test to know, not only this test, but any test. Once you do, and why did we get into the Enneagram psychometric testing, Christine? It was because I read a book by Tim Ferriss about a huge book like this, and he was interviewing successful people. And the owner of Dropbox, the first guy who went up to the cloud, said that if you do not have the Enneagram psychometric testing, you don't know yourself. If your managers do not have the Enneagram psychometric testing, you don't know your manager, you cannot work with that team. And if your wife doesn't have the Enneagram psychometric testing, you just increase your chances of getting divorced. And I immediately done, I enrolled, I went to England, I took a week of the Enneagram psychometric testing. I gave you to do one. You thought it was a present. It was a present to myself, not to you, to understand you even better. And secondly, all our managers here at Virardi, or all the managers that we deal with, they should do the Enneagram testing because they will know each other's type, not to take advantage, but to become more effective and more efficient as a team. So your question is an excellent question. It cannot be answered easily. It can be answered once people have taken the test and they have gone through some training. And that way, teams become more effective and more efficient. So it's not an
And
easy
more
answer.
empathetic, I would
And
say.
more empathetic. Excellent. Very well
Yeah.
said, Sophia. Sophia, let's do a recap, please. And if you have a graph to show, even better. If you don't, it's okay.
Yeah, so let's go back to the diagram of the Enneagram. We have talked about number one, the strict perfectionist, the person who sees life as black and white. Number two, the considerate helper. Their mission in life is to help others, and they get disappointed if they don't get help. The competitive achiever, their mission and their view in life is that they want to get the medals, the success, and they want to appear successful to others. The intense creative, which we have seen today. The quiet specialist, we have also seen today, the people who like to research a lot. The loyal skeptic, the person who brings doubt into the equation, who always has a plan B. The enthusiastic visionary, the person with many ideas, who likes to experience the life in full. The active controller, who believes that the only way to be happy in life is to control the others and the situations around them. And finally, the adaptive peacemaker, who wants to bring peace and harmony in the world. And I would urge you to, if you have missed the previous episodes, I would urge you to look at them, and please tell us in the comments below not only which type you think you are, but what type of questions do you have regarding the different personalities that we have seen. And otherwise, the other thing I want to urge you is, if you want to know yourself better and if you want to improve more, we are offering the Enneagram test at a special price, including 1 hour coaching from Michael. I'm going to put the caption here so people can, there you go. So people can subscribe if they need. And thank you for being with us, and thank you for the lovely comments and the questions. I have to say it was a very enjoyable 3 episodes that we had here. I don't know if
Thank
you
you
agree,
very much.
Michael.
Yes, true. I totally agree, Sophia. I have to tell you, you were on fire today. So congratulations. Your
Thank
recap
you.
was amazing. And I have a feeling that in the recap video that we do every Saturday, I want to appear at all. You will appear recapping those 9. I loved it. Or we can do one today with those 9 recap, and we do another one on Saturday so I can appear just a little bit, please. And I love the question from Christine. It was amazing. And thank you for everyone who's been present. If you missed the other 2 episodes and you want to watch them, we're dropping them together with the Book a Coaching Package link in all our social media profiles. And thank you very much for being present and for being active, because a lot of you were very active. So thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you to
everyone.
Sophia. Thank you. Have a lovely week.